Hi, it's Michael Senoff with Michael Senoff's HardToFindSeminars.com. Title of this interview is called How to Go from the Fear of Dying to the Joy of Living. It's an interview with Dr. Dean Ornish. Many people believe they'd be happier if they could just have more of something, more money, more beauty, more success. But according to Dr. Ornish, prominent doctor and author of The Spectrum, those kinds of thoughts usually make us more stressed and unhappy. To the point, even if we got the more we wanted, we wouldn't be able to enjoy it. Fortunately, though, Dr. Ornish says stress isn't something that happens to us. It's how we react to what's happening to us. And there are many ways to lengthen our fuses and find the love, connection, and community that studies show are key factors to good health and happiness. And in this audio, you'll hear many of those ways. You'll also learn how to personalize a way of eating and living that's right for you. You'll learn the optimum foods for good health, what foods help us grow more neurons, and which ones help us feel better. You'll learn all about processed foods. Are they really as bad as the rap they're given? You'll learn simple ways to reduce your stress in as little as a minute a day. You'll learn why you might want to think twice before getting bypass surgery or stents to prevent heart attack, and what you can do instead, and much, much more. According to Dr. Dean Ornish, health isn't something we gain. It's something we already have until we disservice it. A few simple lifestyle choices can make a huge difference, like what we eat, how we respond to stress, how much exercise we get, and what kind of love is in our life. And in this audio, you'll hear all about how to improve the quality of your life and get back to the joy of living. Now let's get going.
Hi, this is Chris Costello, and I've teamed up with Michael Senoff to bring you the world's best health-related interviews. So if you know anyone struggling with their weight, with cancer, diabetes, ADHD, autism, heart disease, or other health issues, send them over to Michael Senoff's HardToFindSeminars.com. Today we're talking with Dr. Dean Ornish, author of The Spectrum and many other best-selling books, named by Life magazine as one of the 50 most influential members of his generation. Dr. Dean Ornish has also served on the Senate Committee for Integrative Medicine and is the founder and president of the nonprofit Preventative Medicine Research Institute in Sausalito, California. Thanks for joining us today, Dr. Ornish. You had a wonderful quote in Spectrum. You said, a quote by Sophocles, "One word that frees us all from the weight and pain in life, and that word is love."
Yes. Well, we're often using these very high-tech, expensive, state-of-the-art measures to prove the power of these very low-tech and low-cost and often ancient observations like Sophocles made. That study after study has shown that people who don't feel a sense of love and connection community are many times more likely to get sick and die prematurely than those who have that, in part because you're more likely to abuse yourself, you're more likely to smoke and overeat and drink too much and work too hard and so on when you don't feel that sense of love and connection community. But even through mechanisms we don't fully understand, when people have a sense of love and connection community, they're much more likely to avoid getting sick and dying prematurely.
With reversing disease, what are the most important things that people can do to regain their health?
It's a different conception than I was taught in medical school, that health is not something you gain. Health is something you have already until you disturb it in most cases. That our bodies have a remarkable capacity to begin healing themselves, and much more quickly than we had once realized, if we simply stop doing what's causing the problem in the first place. I studied yoga for many years with a spiritual teacher named Swami Satchidananda. People say, "What are you, a Hindu?" He'd say, "No, I'm an undu." And that's really a shorthand way of saying that what we try to do is to identify what's causing the problem and then help people to change that. Usually when I lecture, I often show a cartoon of doctors busily mopping up the floor around a sink that's overflowing, but nobody's turning off the faucet. And when we turn off the faucet, then we allow healing to occur. On a spiritual level, people think that happiness is something that you get. If only I had more this or that or less of this or that, then I'd be happy. You know, more money, more power, more beauty, more accomplishments, whatever it happens to be. And the more they believe that, generally the more stressed and the more unhappy they feel. Until they get it, they feel stressed. If somebody else gets it and they don't, they feel even worse. And even if they get it, it's very seductive because it makes you think that your happiness and well-being came from getting this thing that you thought you needed, but it's never enough. It's like, well, now what? One patient said, "I can't even enjoy the view from the mountain I've climbed. I'm already looking over the next one." Or, so what? Big deal. It doesn't really provide that lasting sense of meaning and happiness. Even the yoga and meditation techniques that we include. In the back of the Spectrum, there's a DVD that my wife, Ann, has created. She's, I think, the best yoga teacher in the country right now. I'm obviously a little bit biased, but even before we had that kind of relationship, I was saying that about her. And meditation and yoga don't bring you a sense of peace and well-being. What they help you do is to stop disturbing, at least temporarily, what's there all the time. And that may sound like a semantic distinction, but it's a very powerful, profound one, because if we think that happiness is something that we have to get, or health is something we have to get, then it's always like, what am I lacking and how can I get it? But if we say, well, wait a minute, that's our nature to be happy until we disturb it, that's a very empowering realization, not to blame but to empower, to say, oh, if it's me, I can do something about that. I can react in different ways. I may be looking in the wrong places. And so, seen from this perspective, the suffering that many people are experiencing in the world, without in any way trying to minimize it, can be a very powerful wake-up call to help us re-examine what really matters and what may not matter as much as we once thought. It's so easy to be glib and say to somebody who's suffering, oh, you know, suck it up, be happy, and then the proper response is a nice Hawaiian punch to me. But without in any way trying to minimize anyone's suffering, I know from my own experience there are much greater degrees of freedom than I had once realized about how I interact with the world. That stress is not just what happens to you, it's how you react to what's happening to you. In the study of telomeres that I mentioned earlier, Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn, who discovered telomerase, will probably win a Nobel Prize for her discovery, and we collaborated on this study showing that lifestyle changes increase telomerase and thus telomere length, had done an earlier study 4 years ago with Alyssa Epple, where she found that when she looked at women who were under chronic emotional stress because they were taking care of kids with birth defects or autism, you know, some really awful things, that the more the women felt stressed and the longer they reported feeling stressed, the lower their telomerase and the shorter their telomeres, meaning they would live a shorter lifespan and all other things being equal. But it wasn't an objective measure of stress. It was the women's perception of it that really determined whether or not it affected them. And it wasn't necessarily a function of how bad somebody else might think their circumstances were. You know, to some degree, you know, if you're in a concentration camp, that's going to be a lot more stressful than having lunch at Starbucks. But even in a concentration camp, Viktor Frankl wrote in a book called Man's Search for Meaning that not everybody survived, and that the people who survived generally reacted to these dire circumstances in ways where they found a sense of purpose and meaning that enabled them to cope with it. And so what I'm learning in my own life in much less dire circumstances is that I have a much greater degree of choice than I had once realized, that I don't necessarily have to react in the same ways. One of the nice things about practicing yoga and meditation on a regular basis is that even without having to think about it, we react in different ways.
Hi, it's Michael Senoff with HardToFindSeminars.com. Thanks for watching this video. You know, many of my interviews last 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, sometimes even up to 2.5 hours long. They're actual mini seminars, and you've just listened to a short sample of just one of over 117 hours of exciting, hard-hitting, mind-blowing interviews on how to make money in direct mail, advertising, copywriting. I assure you, there is not a resource anywhere on the internet or on the planet that comes close to the free information I provide at HardToFindSeminars.com. So go right now to HardToFindSeminars.com and you'll have free access to 117 hours of audio interviews with typed word-for-word downloadable transcripts and downloadable MP3 files. Please browse some more of the videos or go right directly to HardToFindSeminars.com. Thanks for watching.